Our scripture reading comes from the Gospel of Luke chapter 12, verses 13 through 21. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Friend, who set me to be a judge or arbiter over you?" And he said to them, "Take care. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." And then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly, and he thought to himself, "What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be?' So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich towards God." The word of God for the people of God. Praise be to God. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O God, my rock and my redeemer. So, God called St. Peter into the head office of heaven one day and told him that he needed to get account of everyone who would be coming to heaven in the next 100 years to make sure that they had enough room. And God instructed Peter to go down to earth and to make a door-to-door canvass, sort of a census, so that they could really know the numbers. Peter takes off to earth, but after only one day on the job, it was obvious that this job was just way too big to be handled by St. Peter by himself. So Peter went back to God and explained the situation to him. And then Peter suggested what they should do instead is just write a letter to everyone who'd be coming in the next 100 years and do a census that way. Well, God thought that was a pretty good idea, so they cranked up the Pearly Gates printing press, printed and mailed a letter to everyone who would be going to heaven in the next 100 years. You know what that letter said? You mean you didn't get yours? I couldn't read this. Our passage today begins with a conversation about inheritance. Who gets what after death? And often the delicate issue surrounding death is where the money goes and who gets the goods. It's the issue of inheritance. So to avoid conflicts, we make wills, planning that the money and property will go to the right people, just trying to avoid all of those conflicts. And we also make lists. We'll go from room to room, putting names on things like specific lamps or pictures as to who gets what from each of the different rooms in the house. For example, folks will go through the whole house, marking the names of children and grandchildren on specific items. So we make our wills and we make our lists because we don't want any conflicts or confusions. You know, death brings out enough tension as it is, so we plan for who gets what. And these are often delicate times. Why? Well, oftentimes, grandpa greed, an old sin, just slips out so quiet. And noses can get bent out of shape so easily. There are jealousies, irritations, keeping score of who's getting what. These are delicate moments just right for family conflict. For example, when my grandmother died, there wasn't any money left. Their savings had been gobbled up by the high cost of nursing home. But there were some special items that were left in her house. So there we were one day, the whole family in Grandma's house, going around a circle, and each person getting a choice, beginning with the oldest child and then working on them. Well, Grandma had already designated some things to some of the kids and the grandkids. And yes, we kept track of who got the wedding ring and how much we thought it was worth. And we watched, we counted, we calculated. But all in all, it really went pretty smooth. But we're all aware from our own history and from other people's stories that the dispersing of an inheritance has the potential for conflict. It brings out all kinds of greed in us. This is a tough passage. It's the kind that would be easy to avoid or to overlook because of the challenge and the confrontation inherent in it. But it's also one that just hollers to be heard. And if you look at the placement of this passage in the Gospel of Luke, we see that Jesus had been preaching and teaching about eternal issues, when out of nowhere, this guy just jumps up and derails Jesus' train of thought. It's sort of like sitting in on an adult version of a children's sermon. This nowhere man hadn't heard a word that Jesus said. All he knew is that Jesus spoke with authority, and maybe, just maybe, he could convince Jesus to use that authority to settle a family squabble. This nowhere man was so consumed by his problem that he blurted out in a whiny, irritable voice, "Jesus, tell my brother to divide my inheritance with me. He won't give me my share." Kind of sounded like a second or third grader saying, "I'm telling." And as a result of that interruption, Jesus tells this too close to home, uncomfortable, and challenging parable. It's a parable about choices. It's a parable about lifestyle. It's a parable that parks on our doorstep and just won't leave us alone until we confront it. A couple of weeks ago, our grandkids spent a few days with us, and Sarah thought that to keep them from killing each other, that we would bribe them for good behavior. And I got a kick watching them decide what color of jelly beans to take whenever they did something good. Avonlea, our oldest grandchild, knew what she wanted, and she would just dig for it right away. But Ellis and Davis, they'd kind of reach into the jar slowly, they'd ponder and contemplate. And they looked long and hard because they knew how much they liked the red ones and the yellow ones. They knew how much they liked the green ones and the brown ones. And who doesn't like cherry and lemon or apple and root beer? But the other flavors in the jar made it hard for them to choose sometimes because there's peach and cream soda and raspberry and watermelon. And then there's the mysterious purple. You gamble when you take that one because it's a surprise. But eventually they'd all choose. We all have to make choices. For our grandkids, the decision concerns what color of jelly beans to take. 13-year-olds have to consider their image and the right friends. A 20-year-old has to ponder careers and courses to take to reach that career. 30 and 40-year-olds have to consider time management and family concerns and where to go on vacation. Every decade, every new developmental period, every new day, we're faced with decisions. Decisions of candy and life support systems. Decisions of clothes to wear and cars to buy. Decisions of life and death and every stage in between. Every one of you here this morning began this day with a decision. You decided to get out of bed. You decided what clothes you were going to wear, what to eat for breakfast. You made the decision to come to church. You even decided where to sit. Most of the decisions we make are trivial. Sometimes we don't think they are, but in the grand scheme of things, most of the decisions we make are fairly trivial. What we have for breakfast isn't going to influence world peace. Whether we wear the red shirt or the gray one isn't going to affect the economy. But there are decisions which are very, very important, and they shape our lives. They declare what our priorities are. They proclaim our values and our viewpoint toward life. And that's the point of this parable of the rich fool, told to the nowhere man who wanted Jesus to tell his brother to quit being so stingy and to share the family inheritance. At times, the church has read this parable and said, well, Jesus does not want us to prepare for tomorrow. It's also been used to put down the wealthy and the accumulation of riches. I don't think it's really any of those. I think that the key to this whole meaning is found in verse 15, where Jesus said, take care, be on guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possession. And only after saying that did Jesus tell this parable of the rich fool. And it's a parable about a man who was interested in bigger barns, bigger cars, bigger houses, fancier clothes, bigger bank accounts, and he had little concern for his spiritual well-being. This parable was told to show this brother who wanted his share of the inheritance that money isn't everything, that material possessions aren't everything. Now, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with or bad about bigger. But Jesus is making the point that bigger isn't always better, especially if you've left your spiritual life and your most important relationships hanging out there in the cold. Bigger isn't always better. Have I'm sure you have heard that old saying that he who dies with the most toys wins? You've heard that, right? That kind of speaks of our rampant materialism, our so-called need that we have to buy more and more stuff. Well, I know there's hope, because there's another saying that goes, he who dies with the most toys is dead. Well, I think this confrontation between Jesus and the nowhere man and the telling this parable about the wealthy farmer asks us to examine the priorities and the decisions of our lives. Are you happy with the decisions that you've made that have brought you to this point in your life? Do you feel that you are fulfilling God's purpose? Are you letting the love of Christ guide your life and shine through your life? These are hard questions. Let me share how my brother Rodney answered those questions in his life. He had the bigger house, the bigger car, the bigger bank account, the bigger job. And he spent a great deal of time at the office with the demands of his career and promise of even larger responsibilities. And he could have easily risen to an even more prestigious and high-paying position. But he came to the conclusion that he had another priority in his life. There were 2 children around his supper table every night. And unfortunately, he rarely made it home for supper, and most of the time was gone before the kids even got up for breakfast. And one morning, he realized that the childhood of his children was rapidly disappearing. And he decided that the success and prestige of his job were robbing him of something very important. So he asked to be transferred to another job. And he took a cut in pay and a cut and responsibility. Nearly everybody around him, including me, thought that he was crazy. And we all wanted to know what was wrong. We wanted to know why he would intentionally ask for a demotion. But he had carefully weighed all the options, and he decided that he needed to reevaluate his life, and that his children and family and faith needed to be moved up on his priority list. And he made a life-changing decision that goes against the grain of our success-orientated culture. But it was a decision that he could happily live with. He could sleep at night. And he took more seriously his involvement in the life of his children and in his faith relationship. That wasn't an easy decision, but he remembered the important things in life. And that's what this parable is all about. Jesus wasn't telling us that possessions and riches are evil. He was challenging us to look at what gets the most attention in our life. This parable asks us to look at our life with a magnifying glass. Are we actually living out the faith that we proclaim? Have we shared the love of Christ freely with others? Have we set our priorities to be consistent with our faith? Amen. If there is anyone here this morning who would like to make their profession of faith, or someone would